What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with the final track on this CD of Gioachino Rossini's overtures to his operas, and this is arguably, or at least one of, his most famous, which is to say the Overture to the Thieving Magpie, an opera he premiered. I don't know how long it took him to write it, but it premiered in 1817. It was based on a libretto, or it utilized a libretto by one guy who I think wrote that based on a literary work by two people, so, a bit of not a collaboration in modern senses, but it was ultimately, born out of a story written by two people and then adapted in libretto form for Rossini by one of his associates. In any case, this is, again, a very famous overture, and I think in this case at least, it eclipses the notoriety of the opera itself. I think it's been used in many, many things over the years. I probably mentioned this when I did previous reactions on this CD, but one of the places that was recalled to my mind recently where this was used was in an episode of the BBC Sherlock, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman. And it's a very notable scene with James Moriarty, and the moment they started playing it, I was like, oh my god, it's so perfect, because it's like a heist scene, or at least like sort of a heist scene. But yes, the Thieving Magpie, which, if you didn't know, I think it's called La Gazza Ladra in the original Italian, but magpies are a type of bird, and like corvids, they are actually very intelligent. They're, my understanding, like now known to be one of the most intelligent non-human species in terms of being able to recognize symbols and even engage in like symbolic behavior, or behavior that's not essential in terms of subsistence and so on. In any case, the point is the overture is known in particular for using a lot of snare, which there's a lot of timpani in various classical compositions, but snare is definitely something that would be less common, and it's a very dramatic use of it. So I think it's the kind of piece that will stick in your mind for being not only very dramatic and epic and powerful, but for using an instrument that definitely is not common in the overall genre. So let's listen. This is the final track on the Classical Evolution Symphonic Orchestral compilation of Gioachino Rossini's overtures, and they must have done another release for his overtures, because this is called Overtures Volume 1, but it's performed by the Plovdiv Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Ruslan Raichev, and this is their performance of the Thieving Magpie Overture by Gioachino Rossini. worth the price of admission alone. Like, you could leave the theater after that, and I think you would have been well rewarded for attending. Never mind the fact that there's an actual opera that would follow that. I mean, it's brilliant. It's arguably my favorite again. All the ones on this CD compilation I think are excellent, and I'm sure there are many other overtures that Rossini has done which are held in very high regard, but I really think this might just be first among equals. I can't even decide what part I like best. I like when it gets a bit more serious with that rapid fire string motif and there's a bit of, danger or intensity to it. And then I like the way that sort of peters out, holds for a moment with a couple like soft pad style melodies, and then we go into that dancing, almost ballet style light section a couple times, and it's, there's a fun to it. There's what's the right word? Not like a silliness, but there's definitely like a cheeky quality to that section, and you can see people dancing about. I'm actually now thinking another place I've seen this overture used, if I'm remembering correctly, is one of the Broken Lizard films, Slammin' Salmon. Maybe not their best movie, but it has a scene where this like calamity happens. It takes place in a restaurant, and there's like this slow motion scene where one of the waitresses who's actually spent time as a ballerina, she's like dancing around the dining floor, and everything's done in slow motion, and you can see these different moving parts that are about to crash into each other quite literally, and as it gets more intense and more intense, and then finally it all sort of falls apart or collides, and there's sort of a comedic blow to that. But I think the piece that's used is that sort of light fun section that we hear a couple times. So again, it's like I've been saying in a lot of his overtures, I love the way he introduces a sequence, and then he gives you something new just as good, and then eventually we find our way back to these different motifs and different sections. They come multiple times, and the second time around for all of them, not only are they enjoyable melodically, but they have this familiar feel, like, oh, this part again. So I just love the way he writes. And I will continue to say, like his countryman, Vivaldi, I do think Rossini is one of the best writers for strings out there. I just love the scale in some cases, but also the intimacy in others, but most importantly, just the elegant beauty of his string writing, whether it's a single violin line or the full string section. Obviously here, the snare drum, whether it's those big long builds and rolls, or just those little, almost like marching like flourishes, as the melody is getting bigger and bigger. And I do love that too, the way that, there's different parts where you're enjoying one melodic run, and then a bigger melody kind of comes over the top of it, and then it peters out, and then one that you already know, it returns with aplomb, and then the ending section is like the most unique, because the way it transitions from the kind of fun like ballet part back into the serious strings the first time is not what it does at the end, where it goes for this big finale and that classic triumphant finish. So it's just brilliant. It's fantastic. One of my favorite standalone pieces, meaning not multi-movement pieces. Indeed, one of my favorite overtures from someone who I regard as maybe the master of the overture. So yes, very much enjoyed going through this CD. Hopefully you did too. Shout out to all the folks who've been commenting and watching. Michaela has watched. I think Yvonne commented on one. I know Jupiter 2 Mission, you've been commenting on a number of them with some great information that was not privy to me in advance. So appreciation to you. And I think we're going to go on to some Mozart, because I've reacted to a lot of different things in this run of classical reactions, this classical reaction playlist. But Wolfgang Amadeus has not yet graced the playlist, so I think I'm going to have to do that next. I have a number of CDs, both like him specifically and his appearance on some, like great works or great symphonies type of compilations. So I'll have to go through. There's a horn concerto I would love to do. His Jupiter Symphony I think is fantastic. So there's a number of them that I would like to, as we hear a large engine outside, that I would like to hear, but I haven't necessarily decided yet, so I'll pick something good. Either way, once we get through that, I'm going to do Smetana. I have some more like Beethoven ideas that I'd like to go through. So yes, plenty more, And in fact, I recently, when I went to my parents' house, I ripped a number of my dad's classical CDs and I've loaded those. I have those like operatic aria or, like opera-based classical music compilations that I got from him not too long ago, which is where I got the performance of that Anvil chorus. Or actually, no, that one came from the actual full, was it, it's La Traviata, right? But yeah, I have the full performance of that. And shout out to Jupiter 2 Mission. I think you mentioned, a couple other pieces from that might be worth going through. But also I have the compilations with like a number of, different operatic arias and performances that I will, make some selections from. So the point is, plenty more classical reactions coming. Do let me know what you think. Luca and I will see you next time, but I do want to just check in case I'm wrong about that, because I would hate to have misspoken and not have corrected it. It's Il Trovatore. I apologize, but I do think that's, didn't Jupiter 2 Mission say that's from the same period? I think that might be right. Let me just check everything now that we're here. Yeah, okay, so Trovatore, Traviata, and Rigoletto were from the middle period from Verdi. So yes, thank you again to Jupiter 2 Mission for providing me some extra info here. But yes, we'll go back to some more operatic pieces as well. Do let me know what you think of this piece, and I will see you next time. Peace.